Pranakasha live stream.
Hi folks, it's Matt from Pranakasha Productions, and today we are talking with Quinn McGowan, an extremely talented comic book artist from Memphis, Tennessee.
Hey everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, how about yourself?
Pretty good. Well, I'm gonna just start off by complimenting you on your pullover. I like, is that
Thank
purple
you.
or
Thank
pink? It looks kind of purplish
This
from
is
my end.
yeah. This actually hues pretty close to a pink. My wife and I have a matching outfit of this nature because, of course, one of the great pinnacles of adulthood and marriage is wearing matching outfits with your spouse. Shout out to my wife.
Yeah, the closest thing I have to that is me and my wife have a couple of Hawaii shirts that mine has got animal on it and hers has Miss Piggy.
Nice. See, my wife is a fan of Miss Piggy and Hello Kitty, so already we're headed in the right direction.
There you go. That's cool. Wow. Okay, so you've got like you got several comic book projects in the works, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Trying to filter through things that I can talk about. So I am
So you signed an NDA with yourself?
Yes. And there are lashes in the paperwork if I make mistakes. So I'm the creator of a character called Project WILDFIRE. That's a comic book that a comic book character that I created when I was about 16.
Oh,
I
cool.
recently inked a publishing deal with Second Sight Publishing out of Mississippi. And around the top of the second quarter, we should be expecting to put those books in comic book stores across the country and shortly thereafter in bookstores everywhere. So I'm really excited about that. We'll also be doing some stuff digitally that will be rolling out in the next few weeks or so. So that's going to be a big thing. And you can find all that stuff at operative.net or legendspresscomics.com.
Okay.
I
Link in the description.
I was recently in Noir is the New Black from Fair Square Comics, which is an anthology series of all African-American writers and artists and creators. I actually won my first Ringo Award for a collaborative effort from ComicMix called Mine, and it was created to benefit Planned Parenthood. And I was also in Elsewhere with some good folks. My homeboy Zach Dolan, who passed away recently, and Unlikely Hero Studios. So I'm always working. I do a lot of client-based stuff. A lot of corporations seem to be in the comic books now, so sometimes I get pulled in to do that sort of stuff. But yeah, I get to do the thing that would excite 16-year-old me a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So now I'm not a huge expert on comic books, but I did find out about Amazon's site called ComicMixology. I'm sure you know what that is, right?
Yes.
So like, does your stuff end up in there as well?
So we are getting ready to make a digital foray into both ComicMixology and Webtoons. We have been using a lot of independent sites. I actually started out just flat out on the internet. So we should be there soon. We're actually going to be on Amazon, ironically. As I understand, the ComicMixology is phasing out. So like,
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
okay.
The game is it's fluid, right? And especially in the digital realm, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of movement.
Okay.
So yeah, I can't imagine it's too dissimilar from whatever life was like after the meteor hit, right? Like things are happening, but they haven't kind of settled into what they're going to be.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. And so let me ask you this. So
Mhm.
You got your finger in a lot of different pies. Do you just self-market yourself, or do you have to have an agent that does all this stuff for you, or how does that work?
I'm just a loudmouth. So that's largely what that's about. And I will probably need an agent at some point in the near future, but a lot of this is just in the most real sense of the word being active in my own community here. Like I'm part of some activist communities, and a lot of my artwork started out from the slant of being commentary about issues that affected people.
Political
So
activism.
yeah,
Okay.
so I'm not afraid to get into intense conversations.
All
And
right.
on a
Well,
long enough timeline, the occasional response in an intense conversation either becomes viral or draws a little bit of attention and or ire, depending on how people are reading it.
okay. So what would you say is like the hottest issue right now from your point of view?
In comics or just in the world?
Just in the world. I mean, as far as activism goes, political activism.
Um, so like at the core of any worthwhile endeavor, the kind of common denominator is respect. So
Okay.
for me, being active in this moment politically is about ensuring a baseline of respect, right? If everybody's on the same baseline, if everybody really has equal footing, then you could see change, right? So I find myself pretty frequently standing up for people in groups that I'm not even necessarily a part of. Like I'm a cisgendered Black male, but even in I left out a book, but even in the service of my work, I actually work with my wife, who's the writer and I'm the artist, on a comic book called Luna Unleashed, which is for the Black Women's Health Initiative out of Atlanta, Georgia, and they deal in HIV prevention, trans issues. So just making sure that everybody is treated equally is the baseline issue. And ironically, when I teach or educate, or even when I'm talking to my own sons, I tell them that baseline of equality is the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, right? Is Star Wars is kind of a fantasy about a past existence for humanity, and Star Trek is a representation of the potential of our best self. You cannot get on a starship with the base level of bigotry that human beings exhibit here, right? You're not ready for the guy with the gills on his neck if you're still angry about brown people. Right?
Yeah.
Or if you can't get on the transporter device and feel comfortable standing next to someone from Kazon or Cardassian or something, right? If you're not able to get over those baseline points of bigotry, you can't hang out with Dax if you don't believe that trans women are women, right? Like these are simple calculuses that we'd have to engage in order to become our best selves. So the other things kind of drift away if you treat everybody equal. I guess that's the short version of that answer.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a thing. So, like Star Trek TOS season 1, and which is still considered one of the best episodes, is Balance of Terror, right?
Absolutely.
And there's a very poignant scene in there where Kirk lashes the guy he's actually a guest star. He's like a helmsman or a weapons officer. When he says, "Look, man, bigotry does not belong in this bridge, and you need to put that away right now." Because he was like, "We don't need Spock. Spock looks just like the Romulan, so we can't trust him." That was a huge theme in that episode.
Right.
So yeah.
And there's there is such poignant to what Star Trek, there's a lot of great Trek out there now, but TOS, in terms of being what Roddenberry, seemed to have been seeking, not just a wagon train in space, but being a frontiersman in looking at equality, in normalizing our interactions with each other and being able to find the best in each other and being able to problem solve. Now, I spent my whole life watching TOS as a child. It was the sort of thing that played in reruns as I was finishing my homework. But my generation is, of course, TNG. Right. And so much of that show was about problem solving. So much of that show kind of quietly alluded to the idea that you could put a captain, a helmsman, an engineer, and a doctor in a situation. And if the captain gets knocked out, the doctor could take charge. If the doctor got hurt, the helmsman could administer first aid. That everybody could do a little bit of everybody's job. Everybody's smart. Everybody's capable. So I'll go on track all day if you get me started. So you have to be careful.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to dig a little farther. So like even the issue of equality, bring up a can of worms. Yeah. Like, well, I'm an IT guy by day.
Right.
And so I work for King County, which is one of the biggest counties in Washington State, and it's in Seattle, Washington. It's also one of the most liberal counties, and so we get lots of training on ESJ, which is called equity and social justice, and all that kind of stuff. The biggest thing that fits that I remember from it is like, well, equality doesn't mean giving everybody an equal chance. What it means is equalizing the playing field. So it means like if you have like a group of people that are economically challenged, or they're a particular slice of society that doesn't have the same opportunities that other people have, equality isn't just giving them this level playing field. You have to lift them up to make them equal. So that's like the whole thing about oh shoot, what's it called? Affirmative action. Okay. So that's the whole thing about, look, this college needs to admit 10 Black people, 5 Latinos, 3 Asians, and then a couple of and some Native Americans, and that whole idea. And it does. And if they're competing with white people and they're both equal, then you have to pick the minority over the white person. So that's a really hot topic, so, depending on where you stand. Basically, depending whether you're white or not, or one of the other colors, right?
So I think the component that ends up so frequently missing in those situations, right, is the focus becomes the action, and there is no focus on understanding. There is a reason why, and I think one of the failings in that tends to be that if I, from a human level, right? Like let's just look at this from a human level.
Okay.
Any child, any race in the world that we live in, especially here in the United States, if you let that child go from age 0 to say 13,
right,
never having washed the dish, and then you bring that child into a room one afternoon after dinner, and you tell that child, you're going to wash dishes every Tuesday and Thursday from now on, and you don't say anything else, this child will become enraged. This child has been rickrolled. This child has been railroaded.
Wait a minute,
the
I like
dishes
that
have
song.
been getting washed the entire time without me. Why do I have to wash dishes? I've never had to do that before, and the dishes have been taken care of just fine. Does any of this sound familiar?
Okay, yeah.
Because the logic is based in, of course it doesn't feel fair, because you just kind of dropped me into a situation and dumped the responsibility on my head. You didn't explain to me that the consumption of food in the house, hold on just a second. The consumption of food in the house is a shared issue, and that people have been doing more than their fair share. and you're going to educate me as to how that system works, what my place within that system is, and how me doing my share can make things better in the long term. Right? So what tends to happen is there's an atmosphere of resentment that is totally understandable, but there is no explanation to go with it. And then that resentment bellows out into the real world. Now the guy who isn't the guy that got hired at your job, he's just another Black guy. And this speaks to something. There's no interaction. You don't know the Black guy that you're going to take out your anger in traffic on any better than the guy that you got hired that's working with you at your cubicle, right? So you haven't learned anything. There's just this resentment that you doing your hard work and putting in your effort, just somebody got pushed into the way and nobody explained anything to you. So I think that, you know, when we look at systems, sometimes that can be an impediment in the sense that I have long suspected that there is something sinister in the way that affirmative action is implemented. It's implemented in a way that creates an atmosphere of resentment because there's no training, there's no explanation. There's just kind of some finger wagging and saying, well, you people have been terrible to people that you've never met. And for reasons that we won't go in beyond that, here are 5 candidates that you're going to have to hire, that you're going to have to put focus on without us explaining why. Of course, it's going to create these.
All right, I'm gonna do the devil's advocate. So, say I'm a manager of some company, you know, or like I'm like the dean of some or okay, let's say this: I'm a football coach, right? And how come if I'm on my football team, they don't say, look, man, there's most football teams in the country have like a majority of Black people on them, and there's not as many white people. You have to hire more. You have to have more white kids on your football team from now on. How come they never do that?
How are white children impacted by not being allowed to play football in an organized team, in a merit-based system where the merit is speed, strength, and agility, in a country where human beings were bred for speed, strength? You see what I'm saying? So there's the part where you know me from Twitter, and you know that I frequently use logic fallacy referees. Yeah. Right. So the logic fallacy referee that I would blow the whistle and throw down in this situation would be false equivalency. The difference is the level of impact. You're talking about a 1 to 7% impact in terms of job market, in terms of people who will actually make it into the NFL, right? That is a high risk, high reward situation that will not impact people on the level economically that say fairness in regular jobs would. Right? And so when you talk about systems that take away people's ability to live to a certain standard, you have situations like redlining that even if a Black person does get a good job through affirmative action, they still will not be able to get the kind of home equity that will allow them to build generational wealth. As it stands right now, Black people on the whole are about 200 to 240 years behind white people, the average medium income white family, for generational wealth.
Right. Because there's all kinds of data like that. Well, so, I mean, and that's the thing where okay, so what you're talking about is like, that's why, and that's one of the reasons why there's like white neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods, and all that, because the banks set up all the rules to make sure that it was that way. Because for whatever reason,
set up the rules based on comforting the majority, and the majority in the Western Americans is white people. They have the majority of influence. They get to set the tone. So it doesn't matter.
The banks were run by a bunch of rich white guys is what happened.
Right. And rich white guys sat into the room. They sat in the rooms and they made decisions about who they did not want around them.
Right.
And those sentiments trickle down because America is a country filled to the brim with embarrassed millionaires. I'm going to hit the lottery tomorrow, and then I'll feel a way about the capital gains tax. So if I'm just this far from being rich, and the other rich people say they don't want this, then when I come back from World War I or World War II, damn my buddy that was Black that I fought in a trench with,
Right.
I want to live in a neighborhood that's going to give me the best possibility. And that's, again, human nature. I want to give my family, my people, my group the best opportunity.
Right. So that gets into the whole thing. The one thing I caught from you early on was what you want to do is you want to look at this all from what benefits society as a whole, our whole society, as opposed to just me. So, which is interesting because you get into it and it's like even to be able to even think like that means that you are not struggling. Like if you are literally struggling to survive, then your whole mind, everything about you is really, it's all geared towards how the hell am I going to get my next meal and how am I going to survive or how am I going to keep from freezing to death in the wintertime, right? It's all survivalistic. And it's you don't have the luxury of thinking about how can we make society better and stop global warming. And I really am upset that, music is this way now. There are all these other cares that are higher level things that just aren't in your consciousness because you are trying to survive. So interestingly enough,
and being in survival mode changes the way that you behave within society. So there's a conundrum there because proper society wouldn't dare eat a certain way or not use a certain fork. But if I'm in here and I don't know when I'm gonna eat next, I might eat this with my hands. And now I am considered unsavory to society. So society is taught to function with a short-sighted mind state because they push that person away. And that hungry, very dangerous person may rear his head in another 3 to 5 years in a way that is even more harmful to society, and not just by breaking up social grace.
Surprisingly, I mean, so we live in Seattle where it's very liberal. Again, like I said, King County is like probably the most liberal county in Seattle. And but yet they have a huge homeless problem now. So we have lots of homeless people, and you can't, it's not like it's a concept off in the distance. I mean, you walk around and there's like people living in tents right on the sidewalk, right, literally in the building that I don't anymore because of COVID. I work from home, but 2 years ago, I would walk into our fancy county building that's all green and it's all specified to all these great things and it's all new and fancy looking, and literally across the street a bunch of homeless people. In fact, they even for a while like and the funny thing is that in King County they'll come up with an idea like, oh, we got to help all these homeless people out and we're going to let them temporarily use the patio and that we don't use in this building next to ours. So they did it for a week, right? And then everybody realized, I'm scared around all these homeless people. They're scary. They're dangerous. So that lasted a week, and then they all got cleared out again. So that's it's like not in my backyard type of thing,
Yeah, those temporary small solutions are not about society. They are, again, very individual. Well,
kind of a knee-jerk reaction,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a series of knee-jerk reactions that literally end up putting them back out on the street because they, like when you, oh God, like so much around wealth and homelessness. There's such a powerful and strange dichotomy that along with the issues of equity, it takes me back to Trek. Like as a watcher, as a viewer of the content, I long to see society on Earth functioning in the way that Picard would always very kind of eloquently describe it when he was on another world. Well, on Earth, we no longer have any need for that. It was a very kind of dismissive, absolutist kind of feeling about how they had solved the problem. And I would love to see that. I would love to see the period from which Cisco goes back in time
Right. Deep Space
to San
Nine.
Francisco during the rock.
Yeah.
From there to kind of the version that Picard speaks of, because I think if we can delve into that work, we can get into the understanding that if you really want to think long-term in society, it behooves society to give everybody enough room to breathe and live comfortably, because the uncomfortable are going to make it uncomfortable for everybody.
Have you watched The Expanse? You know that show?
I have not gotten a chance to get into it. The Expanse is one of those things that's on my, what I call my vacation list.
Yeah. That show is all about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is okay. So I'm gonna have to bump it up on my list. Yeah.
And but it's not a racial thing. It's more, well, what happens in The Expanse, the main plot device, if you want to call it, is there's three basic societies. There's the people that live on Earth who are considered slackers because half of them are on welfare, and it's really hard to get a job on Earth now. And so people on what this thing called basic, and basic, which is like welfare type of thing. So there's Earth. Then there's the people on Mars who are kind of the frontier people that are really really committed to terraforming Mars and turning it into this new Earth. And they're really hardworking. They're really militaristic and super motivated. And then there's the people in the asteroid belt who are called the Belters. And they're basically the low class people of the solar system. And they're always getting shit on. And they have to do all the grunge work. And they're the ones who have to, they like mine all the water, and on the rare, they're the miners, they're the coal miners, basically. They get all the wealth and everything from the asteroids, and they send it back to Mars, to the inners. They call Mars and Earth the inners, like the inner planets. And so the show is based around that. And so it's all that. So it's not race based, though the show has all kinds of different races in it, which is cool. So like the showrunners made a point to have all different races represented in the show, but as far as the actors that they choose, but in the show it's never like, well, your skin's this color and mine's this color. It's all about where you grew up, whether you're where a Mars or you're a Belter. So, and to tell you the truth, I mean, that's how I see it too. I really think that race, when we get all upset about race, it's like, you know what, if it wasn't race, it would be something else. It's like, it seems like people just have to have something to get them upset, and they always have to have some other group or person that they can hate, so that they don't have to deal with their own issues, you know?
Right. So, tribalism, I think, is the original sin.
What is?
And tribalism, right? That's the original sin, right? Okay. Like that's your othering as a general rule. Okay. But it was a much more internalized thing, right? Like, oh, don't go over to the other village. They eat children, right? Right. And kind of the parameters were pretty clear. There's only us, right? We don't want to lose our way of life or our tradition, so we want to keep it. Now, we might scare the babies about what the edges of the world look like so that they won't stray off as much. Right. But they can do what they're doing as long as they stay over there, and we'll do what we're doing. Race as a justification is kind of a thing that is produced because good old-fashioned tribalism wasn't enough, right? Circa 15 whatever, when the poor people are at the gates of the monarchy of the French, and they're like, well, this will not do. So they're like, we got to come up with something. Hey, those brown people are taking your jobs. And without missing a beat, without considering that the brown people don't live where you live, or work on the same kind of stuff that you do, they kind of were just like, yeah.
It's just, I mean,
And that
it's just an easy way to
that's where
label people. Well, like you
it is
remember
an easy way to label
when
people, but
9/11 hit, right? Okay, then
right.
suddenly everybody now the new everybody anybody who was Muslim was like immediately evil. And the stupidest thing
And
was, of course, the thing that was so
but here's the thing, though.
yeah.
Here's the thing. I'm a Marine,
Okay,
and
I knew it. I knew you had a military background. I just knew it. So that's why I wore this shirt.
so okay, good
Wait,
deal. So yes, so as a
from
Marine,
San Diego Comic-Con.
right? So as a Marine, that's awesome. Um,
I just knew it. I
we
don't know
are
why. I don't know why, but I could just tell. I was also in the Air Force. I was in the Air Force Reserve for 6 years. So I kind of,
okay.
and I was the Air Force. So like the difference between Air Force and Marines is like the difference between night and day, right?
We call you the chair force.
Okay, yeah, the chair force, exactly. Okay, I'm going to tell you this quick story. This explains it all, and you'll get a kick out of this. So the difference between the Air Force and the Marines are the exact polar opposite of the Air Force. So like when we did Air Force basic training, we had to go one day and do the obstacle course, right? As part of our certification. And the obstacle course is like, you gotta crawl through the mud underneath this barbed wire, and you gotta do all this stuff and scale these walls and all this stuff and all these things, right? That Army people do. Well, so we got there and the instructor goes, it looks like it's starting to rain a little bit. So we don't want anybody to fall and hurt themselves. So we're not going to do this. We're just going to check off the box and call it good for you guys. That's the Air Force.
It must have been nice. It must have been nice. They make us do the mud thing while it's raining.
Of course. I mean, duh.
So yes, they they're a little bit rough, but it as part of any military organization throughout the history of the world, the way that you motivate your like World War I, they were fighting the Krauts, right? And so there are these derogatory terms that kind of give a shift boom ba element to the concept of going to war. And I think one of the
also when you just say the enemy, you need to kill the enemy,
dehumanize
enemy. Well, who the hell is the enemy? And then of course then in most war movies, or a lot of war movies, you finally realize the enemy is a human being, just like
another
me.
set of human beings.
Why the hell are we trying to kill each other just so some people in an ivory tower are moving their chess pieces? Meanwhile, the guys that are out there doing it we're the ones suffering. Why should we even listen to these guys? Anyway,
you
any Vietnam War.
You come back and you're covering your area and you pick up a wallet, and it's a guy's wallet, and he's got a family and he's got pictures in there and dreams and hopes. Those things all come in a very stark relief in certain moments.
Right.
So
and this goes into your comic books, I'm sure, right? This kind of stuff.
There are definitely elements of that. Project Wildfire is as a story, it's the love letter to comics as I remember them. I think one of the great things about the Netflix show of Voltron is that what the guys who made that show did was they made the cartoon that everybody who watched the original Voltron in '84 thought they were watching. It's kind of the way that you played the adventure back in your head as opposed to the reality.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to achieve. My grandfather is one of my early heroes, and one of the things that we would do, because my father was a police officer and my mother was a nurse, so their hours could sometimes be wonky. I spent a lot of time and a lot of weekends with my grandparents, and my grandfather and we had a Saturday routine where we would watch wrestling, George Reed's Superman. No, we watched wrestling, Ultraman, and then the George Reed's version of Superman. And my grandfather's favorite wrestler, he was from the Southern Territories. He was named Wildfire Tommy Rich. He was this, all of our Southern wrestlers, they were muscly men, but they had beer hearts. They were regular dudes. So Wildfire Tommy Rich, he had this bleach blonde hair.
Okay.
And my granddad he loved that guy. I was in the Marine Corps. When we would watch Ultraman, or sometimes they would rotate because it was like one of those UHF channels. So sometimes it would be Ultraman, sometimes it would be like Mighty Joe Young or Godzilla. And so I would see those monsters in the plastic suits. And my grandfather, who was an exterminator, he'd be like, boy, that looked like a bug I killed last week. And then when you get up close on them bugs, they look just like the monsters from them pictures. So this guy here, my grandfather.
Oh, great.
His name is Will Watson. So he had a very Peter Parker-esque kind of surname. And so I was like, well, this is perfect. So the character Project Wildfire, his alter ego, his name is Will Watson. He's named after my grandfather.
Weiss, W-I-S-S?
No. Will Watson, W-A-S-T-O-N. Or W-A-T-S-O-N. Got that backwards. But yeah, so that's an element. Having been in the Marine Corps, there is a Marine unit that pretty much populates the secret organization Monster Watch.
Okay.
And their leader, General Garrett, is always very suspicious of William because he's not a military man. He doesn't have any military training. And so all of those elements are at play. It's very much, like the end of Saint Elsewhere, right? Like inside of my little snow globe is probably some Superman comics that I colored brown, an open Watchmen comic that I don't fully understand, and a bunch of G.I. Joes in a sandbox. That's really what's happening, even down to the idea that we name specific characters after wrestlers. And that's just an Easter egg that I do for myself, even more so than I do for fans. It's something that I do to stay in contact with the roots of what the character is. But the Marines are kind of all up and through those stories as kind of a baseline for how I bounced and verbed as I kind of found my own direction as a person. So,
all right. Speaking of Marines and wrestlers, do you happen to know Eric the Smoke Moran?
I have heard of Eric the Smoke Moran. I have.
Yeah. He is a Marine, ex-Marine. And he was the Smoke. He was the wrestler of the Smoke. And he's also an actor. He's really into the Orville, which is a lot like Star Trek. A lot of people
I do enjoy the Orville. I like some of the people. They're actually one of the actors from the show runs an acting camp that my writer's daughters ran. So it's all a very small universe.
Who was it?
The black actor's name is
Jay Lee.
Yeah, Jay Lee, and he has the exact same name as a comic book artist that I really like. So I feel really bad. Sorry, Jay.
Yeah.
I think I had Will Watson on the brain, and I couldn't get any other.
Jay Lee is a super good pianist, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Really good classical pianist. Yeah,
I know he is multi-talented. I know he is a very talented and obviously very busy man. Like he's always doing stuff.
Yeah.
So
he also does movies. He does indie movies. He produces indie movies. He writes them. He hires actors for him, and he shoots them and edits them, and he does a lot of stuff.
He should totally read some of the issues of Project Wildfire that is already written by one of his students' parents. And if he feels so inclined to play a superhero, we would love to have him.
All right, there we go.
You heard it here first.
I think actually Eric, is friends with them. In fact, I know is. Yeah, Eric has done. Jay Lee has a class that he does, like a class like how to be the best you can be and bring out the best, kind of a motivation type of class. And Eric Moran was in the class, so he knows Jay Lee through that. So there you go.
So see.
Okay, I'll hook you up because Eric's on Twitter quite a bit. And he does do direct messaging, so you can probably. In fact, I'll just tell him. I'll tell Eric to contact you. I just interviewed.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's cool. It's cool.
Wow. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring it back. So I'm just like I don't know if you know this, but like Rod Serling, the guy who did Twilight Zone, right?
I know Rod, not personally, but yeah, I'm a big fan. Absolutely.
So the whole reason why he did Twilight Zone is he actually was really politically active, and he wanted to do a lot of shows about political activism and social commentary and stuff, but the networks wouldn't allow him to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So then he figured out that he can,
Mm-hmm.
if he tells these weird paranormal type of stories, he can bring all his stuff he really wants to talk about in through that genre and talk about it. But the networks will be too dumb to figure out what he's actually talking about. And that's why that's what Twilight Zone is all about. Yeah. That's why he was so into it.
I love that show and its format and its messages. And, you know, there are some great social commentary episodes, but I think my all-time favorite is the Burgess Meredith episode where he's the librarian and he goes down into, he works at a bank. He loves to read. And he goes down into the vault and the world comes to an end. Just that whole beat of, you know, there was finally enough time. I know it's super cliche and every other cartoon in the world has done it, but I remember being very affected by that as a child and watching like the Outer Limits and stuff like that. The time that I spent with my grandparents really helped. I think it helped me in the sense that they were watching that stuff and it became normalized in my mind and it began to kind of set my imagination on fire and all those concepts that are so inherent in science fiction about speaking to the time that we're in. Like all of those things became bedrocked in me pretty early because so much of those things are linked to being with my grandparents and watching all those shows.
That's wild. Yeah, when I was a kid, I always thought that the Outer Limits was like the scariest show ever. Like, a lot of times I was afraid to watch it. I was even the opening thing with like
because they took over your
television set.
Absolutely, it was so scary, and then they would give it back, and then they'd sell you soap, and then they come back and freak you out some more. So their format, I think, was better than Twilight Zone. Yeah, but I don't remember being as impacted by the show itself.
Right.
The kind of the fanfare, the intro of the show was always very impactful. Yeah. And I think the being so scared of it is why I don't remember a lot of episodes because I couldn't look.
Right. I could probably count the number of Outer Limits episodes I watched on one hand because I was too afraid to watch it. It was too scary. I was like, 6 years old or something. But I watched Twilight Zone a lot more, even though Twilight Zone's pretty scary too.
Yeah,
it really gets you into the darker corners of your mind.
Yeah, those people in the mask.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really wild. So
yeah, man.
That's cool. Well, so do you see, like, when you do your comics, do you see that as a medium to advance all your political activism, or is it just a comic book?
It is first and foremost a comic book adventure.
Okay.
It is because like, if we're being real, Superman circa 1938 is in every sense that it's thrown around today, a social justice warrior. His first enemies were not necessarily space aliens or mad scientists. They were often mine owners who weren't paying their workers or slumlords that, wouldn't be fair. I think he threw an abusive boyfriend through a brick wall in one of the early adventures. So I wouldn't go so far as to say I have political machinations that I'm sprinkling into the comics, but as I remember my experiences with comics, those formative ideas around justice, what is right, and acknowledging, like one of the primary things that comic books do for young people is they openly acknowledge that the systems in place at present are faulty at best. That's the whole premise of most comic books. In a world where justice wasn't real, so this guy has to go out and break the law to do the thing. That's your comic book. The systems are insufficient, and as a result, a person with clarity of purpose, with a purity of heart, then steps in to do what society is incapable of doing. Superman is a beacon of hope to a world that hasn't grown into that space yet. Batman is a defender of justice in a world that is so corrupt that it needs a dark defender. So these are the parameters under which comic books exist, are that the systems are broken. So I don't know that I am conscientiously saying, I'm going to stick it to the man and make it to where Black people have all the best things. That's not how I make comic books. There is a central conceit that in my comic book story, particularly, that the world is overrun with monsters. And there's a hero that fights the monsters. And in that fight, he uncovers a mystery that a totally different group of monsters is responsible for making these monsters.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Some of the monsters are human. Some of the monsters are monsters. More often than not, the monsters are the products of the machinations of human beings doing monstrous things.
Mm-hmm.
So justice and kind of doing the right thing in that space inherently will lead young minds to draw political conclusions. But my intention is to make adventures and tell stories about characters that do the right things when the odds are insurmountable.
Okay. So probably so it's all draws from your life experience, and like all the things that come up it's all from your perspective. So then your activism and all that just kind of sort of naturally make its way in, rather than like you making a conscious decision to say, okay, I'm going to tell this story, type of
right
thing.
and that comes from the collaboration with, shout out to Hannibal Tabu, who was the writer, the regular writer on that series. What often tends to happen, Hannibal is deeply versed in a lot of comic book, Star Wars, Transform. He's not only a practitioner as a writer, but he's really well versed in the lore. And a lot of times what happens centrally in the story, I can think of a conversation that we had pretty recently, where he was very much like, okay, here's this thing going on, and kind of the other heroes that William as a character is around, they made these really tough choices, and they're doing these things. And what would William do when he found those things out? And I was like, he'd tell the truth. He was like, well, that's terrible. You can't do that. And I was like, no, that's what he do. Yeah. This new trend of kind of, well, let's give everybody a 5 o'clock shadow, and let's imagine what Superman would be if he was bad. He'd be an asshole. That's not a hard question to figure out. You can look at Homelander, Brightburn, Omni-Man, or any other of a host of kind of meditations on what would the most powerful man in the world do if he were mean-spirited.
Right. Homelander, I recognize that. That's from The Boys.
That's from The Boys.
Yeah.
Right. And if you've seen Invincible, that's also from Amazon. There's a character in there. I won't spoil anything for you. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. Brightburn is a James Gunn vehicle that happened, I think, in between his exit from the first Guardians movie and before he got to do the Suicide Squad. And it's basically an alien, what land in middle America, was adopted by some kindly parents, but the kid is he's just rotten. He's Macaulay Culkin in The Good Son, but he can fly. So these meditations have been experimented with before. And of course, Superman is famously one of the more premier characters that is often saddled with what we in comics call problems you can't punch, right? Superman doesn't deal with racism. Superman kind of openly makes pacts in comics where he's like, I'm not going to solve every problem. So when you ask yourself, well, there was an earthquake last week, why didn't Superman come in and do it? He doesn't solve every problem. He was probably in space. And so I wanted to make some of those problems, if not punchable, I wanted to definitely bring up some issues, going back to your point about, isn't it neat? Let's let the homeless people sit on the patio. And then a week later, it's like, homeless people scare me. Yeah. What happens because we know what happens when an alien who happens to look like a white man from space shows up, sans birth certificate, sans ever having read a Miranda right to Toyman or Lex Luthor, right? We just kind of accept that guy and we roll with it. What happens when he looks like me? And it isn't just because I'm Black. It's because what will this Black person say or do? How does he feel about the way things are? How anxious is he to change things? What would we be able to do if he decided? I often, another metaphor, like when I was trying to teach my sons, I had story time with Dad trying to explain racism to the boys. One of the metaphors that I once used.
How old are your kids?
All of my kids are adults now. They are so great. But when they were young, I think I was trying to explain to the middle son, not just why people are racist, but why they are seemingly afraid of Black folk. And the metaphor that I gave him was, imagine, how we go and we can go into settings that are controlled and we can see a tiger. And the tiger is there and there's some distance between you and the tiger and there are fail safes. What if one day there was a law passed and they said, you have to treat tigers like people? So now you're on the bus and there's a tiger sitting there. And you're thinking about how little you've actually paid attention to tigers. And the reason why you're thinking about how little you've actually paid attention to them is because you don't know right now if this tiger is smiling at you politely on the bus or if he's about
a nice tiger or a mean tiger.
And you don't know. You realize that you haven't really paid attention. So as a defense mechanism, you kind of go into, I hope I don't have to shoot these tigers. And there is a sensibility around, I think there is a degree of imaginary, what would I do in this person's situation?
Okay. So I'm gonna counter this, right? So on the other side, so a lot of times white people will say, well, I feel like Black people are being, so in Seattle, it's very integrated. So I have lots of Black friends, lots of white friends, gay friends, any type of friends. So like, for me, it's like everybody's a human being, right? And that's what Jesus said too, right? So if we go there, we're all children of God. And so this stuff shouldn't matter, but even now, decades after Martin Luther King, it still does, right? But on the flip side, it seems like if a Black person gets on a bus and he's the only Black person on the bus, right? He's quite aware of that, right? There's no way you wouldn't be aware of that you're one Black guy in a bus full of white people. But the same thing happens, like if a white person got on a bus and it's all Black people or all Mexican people or all Asian or whatever, the same thing happens to the white person. They're like, I feel a little strange right now. Like, am I in danger or whatever? So, it happens. It happens both ways, right?
Let me stop you there because I think, again, false equivalence. I think that the obvious nature of knowing that you are different in that situation is completely and fully cast away from whether or not I feel like I am in danger. And the nature of the danger is definitely going to be different. So let me give you an example. White guy gets on the bus. What are they fearing from? Right? They're fearing from, and in a lot of cases, because like Seattle may present an exception, but I want to come back to that as well. But on the whole, a lot of the fears, and statistically, you can ask people whatever, a lot of the fears that seem to be expressed from white people are projections of what they think based on the information they've received about Black folks, which largely comes from media. Right? Sundown towns really existed, right? Black people are mysteriously showing up hung from trees in the present. There is a racial animus against Asian people, against Latino people, that is rooted in the comfort of whiteness. There is a stark and distinct difference there. A person who might, even to the point of, and I find myself, especially on the internet, having to deal with this differentiation a lot.
Okay.
Bigotry as opposed to racism.
Okay.
Can a white person live in a predominantly Black neighborhood and experience being picked on or looked at a certain way or laughed at? Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
But I would challenge that in an environment of largely powerless people, that they are guilty of the sin of being bigoted and then picking on someone that they know to be equally powerless, because chances are they wouldn't be living in that Black neighborhood if they had an option. That's a different experience. So yeah, there's a lot of behavioral animus against the skin color, but there's a difference between there being the power dynamic, right? That family can get up and move. Moreover, they could simply call the cops.
Right. As a white guy. So you're saying that
get results. Something's gonna happen. They're gonna get in the car and they're gonna ride around. And they're gonna find the Black dude that did it, and then the cops are gonna take the Black dude away. But none of those people in that apartment complex will be able to call into that white person's job tomorrow morning and get them fired. They won't be able to talk to the landlord and have them thrown out on the street because there's no institutional power there.
Okay.
I live in Tennessee. Are you familiar with the very famous comic book Mouse, the Will Eisner award-winning comic?
No.
It is a comic book about the Holocaust. Okay. That's long and short of it. It's a powerful book. It is one of the masterworks in comic book sequential art storytelling. And it is recently banned in the state of Tennessee, or in one of the school districts in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, it upsets our children. We don't want you to teach our children things that upset them. You know, we want them to live in their little bubble of nicey nice their whole life. We don't want them to learn about reality.
Idea of survival, right? There is a psychic freedom in not having to live in survival mode. Once I got to a place in my career where I was able to feel like I was making at least enough money to where I'm not going to freak out about how I'm going to pay for this, that, or the third.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Being there allowed me to do things about my health, allowed me to do things about the quality of life that I chose to have, that I didn't have any agency whatsoever over before that. So now let me go back to the idea, because you being from Seattle, I have another dear friend who's from Portland. And of course, in the moment, in the space, those places must feel supremely egalitarian. But the Black person, Black person that lives in that environment, more often than not, is working on eggshells.
Yeah, you know what? Okay. So it's yes and no. The funny thing is that the way I perceive it in Seattle is that people like to pretend that everything's okay, but they do all kinds of, like, if they're well off, if they're middle class white people, right, they have this fantasy that they're all into taking care of the earth and love everyone and do justice and all this and blah blah blah. And like, I have Black friends, I have gay friends, just basically what I just said before. Like, I have all these kinds of friends, I'm not a racist, blah blah blah. And then they talk the talk, right? But if you get in their face and say, that's just bullshit, you're bullshitting me constantly, like, why don't you get real and talk about real issues? They'll get upset, but like, well, you can't talk like that. I mean, we need to use the proper terms, so.
Right. And that's not different than banning Mouse because we don't want to upset the babies.
Yeah. That's the thing.
It's Jeff Goldblum in Thor Ragnarok, right? I don't like the S word. I don't like the S word. The prisoners with jobs. I don't want my fantasy of things being good being disturbed. And I so want to maintain that fantasy that I don't even want to hear the Black person or the brown person or the Latino person or the trans person or the gay person that I call my friend. I don't really want to hear their lamentations.
Right.
I'm not really interested in their pain. I'm interested in their proximity so that I
can look good and I can have cool friends, but at some point it's like you still want to keep my bubble safe. There's a certain amount of dirty stuff that I can deal with, but I don't want to get too involved in that.
Too deep. Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's an edge that I try to stay on. As I said, I am a Black man, but I don't spend my days singing the blues about how the man is keeping me down, because I'm a man. And at the end of the day, that does afford me some agency. It does afford me some privilege. I'm able-bodied. I'm cisgender, right? I am English speaking, right? I am
eloquent.
I have advantages in several ways. You and I having this call right now, this discourse, they can't do that in Syria.
Right.
The constant power outages, the shifts in the power structure, the access to the internet at large, right? There are all these impediments. So what I had to learn over time was the value and the importance of the intersection.
Okay.
To keep my eyes open for the person who is disadvantaged.
Okay.
Because that's the metric. How well am I doing? It's going back to thinking of it biblically. As I treat the least of my brethren, that's the baseline. Who's hurting the most? And where do I stand in relief to them? And how am I doing in regards to that? So I'm not just on the internet all day yelling at Whitey about what they're doing. I'm yelling at the homophobe. I'm yelling at the transphobe. I'm yelling at the person who is being ableist. Because that's how I keep myself honest. Because I try to listen to the people who come from those spaces in my cycle. Right. If I'm ignorant to the amount of times I post a thing and I don't put up closed captions, I have to get into the business of figuring out what I can do about that, because I'm doing a disservice to someone. Right. And it is hard work. But going back to Star Trek, going back to having that helmsman, that captain, that doctor, and that engineer, I have to be willing to do the work. I got to keep up with all of those races, everybody in the Federation, a little bit of basic on how to speak their languages should the translators go out. I got to know something about what the War Corps is doing. I got to know something about what the captain's rotation hours are. I got to know something about how the galleys work, and I got to know something how to run this ship and get it out of here at least half impulse power. Right. I got to juggle that if I'm good enough to be on a starship.
Right. So, okay, I want to throw in some of this too. So you were a Marine, you were in the military, and I was in Air Force Reserve. So I was in the Chair Force and the Reserve. So that's two strikes against me already.
To the reserves. I did my 4 package and jumped on for another couple. And after that, so
I was reserves the whole time. So another thing about being the reserves, the active duty guys always hated us because, like, I ended up having 4 stripes when I was done right here. Right. But I didn't have to do shit to get this because I was guard, right? I took a test or whatever, and then I got a new stripe. Whereas like the active duty guys really had to bust their butt to get another stripe. So that's one of the reasons they're right there, the active duty. That's why the active duty guys hate the guard and the reserves. Because those guys don't know what they're doing. They're just a bunch of lazy, right there. That could be another version of class warfare right there.
It's all tribalism because I took ROTC. And so I automatically got a rank.
Oh, officer. Okay.
Coming into boot camp. So they gave me the business about that. You get it anyway. You get it anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. But the thing that I really loved about being in the military is that, especially like in boot camp, I actually really liked basic training. Once I figured out what the rules were and how to live in that environment, it took me a few days. Right. But I dug it because I really loved, on one hand, I really loved the male bonding experience, just hanging out with 50 other guys all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And I also love that we all came from all different races, all different economics, all different parts of the USA. And we were all thrown in this room, and we all had to deal with this really kind of structured, crazy environment and survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the whole point of basic training, right? But
Absolutely.
like the bonds that we created with each other and the friendships we made were lasting. It was really, it was such an extreme environment that it cut through all the bullshit. And you realized how much bullshit goes on in quote normal everyday life that we take for granted. But really, it's like we've been brainwashed into accepting this stuff. But when you suddenly get thrown into a completely different environment of basic training, and you got a whole new set of, which is also mostly bullshit rules, right? But they're forced on you, and you can't, you just have to do it. It just goofs up your mind, right? And that was the point, I think, really.
Yeah.
So
it's an arbitrary extremism.
Yeah. So I really, of course, now have a great affiliation for anybody that's been in any branch of the military, because there's certain things that we can instantly talk about and we'll understand what we're saying with only almost no words at all. Like the joke I told you about how, we couldn't do the obstacle course because we might fall because it's starting to rain and we might hurt ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that little thing completely describes the difference between Air Force and
even that. Yeah. That's the heart of the esprit de corps. I remember, everybody, it's all kind of Division I football kind of vibe, right? Like in the Marine Corps, we always say we stole the eagle from the Air Force, we stole the rope from the Army, we stole the anchor from the Navy, and on the 8th day, while God slept, we stole the world, and that's how we made our emblem.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I've never heard that before. That's good.
So we all, the Marines are supremely arrogant, right? Even in our training culture, right? Like we say Semper Fidelis, and Semper Fidelis means the way that we prioritize it. It is fidelity to your core, to your country, and to your core, your comrades, and your country. Country comes last.
Okay. So ultimately, I mean, literally, it means always fidelity, right?
Yeah.
Tempore means always. Yeah.
Always fidelity, but the priorities of that fealty or that fidelity are to your core, to your comrades, and to your country.
Okay.
In that order.
Oh, so the country is number 3.
So the Marines, the Marines are the Texas of the military. We're with you guys, but we're
not really
gonna do our own thing. That's where we present. And of course, as a Marine, I will be intrinsically tied because my birthday is 200 years to the date after the first recorded amphibious landing by the United States Marine Corps, which was March 3rd, 1776.
Yeah, you'd really dig The Expanse, because basically the Martians are basically Marines. They're really kick-ass tough.
I sensed it when you said militaristic.
Yeah, they are. And one of the characters is this really tough Marine girl from New Zealand who's just kick-ass, and she has like her body armor and everything, and she's completely into who she is. Her entire identity is as a warrior. And so she's a really fascinating character.
Like. And speaking to that, Marines are absolutely kind of the last of the proud warrior class of the world, unless you're a specialty division of the military, like unless you're Marine Corps recon or force recon or something like that. But big Klingon vibes,
that's why people dig Klingons.
Yeah. But yeah, so I for me, I scoff at this idea, whether people are talking about New Trek or sci-fi in general, where there's this undertone of whining that somehow wokeness or progressiveness is being forced into.
It's ruining Trek. I'm like,
Right.
dude, did you
Yeah,
ever
oh
watch
God.
any episode of TOS in your life?
Well, see, but here's the thing.
It's like always been that
They
way.
watched and enjoyed TOS under the parameters of limitation that were forced on that show because of the time, right? They were pushing it to give you the first interracial kiss. Roddenberry wanted more. I've read things and he wanted a lot more sex. But
Yeah.
Roddenberry wanted to go further than he was allowed to,
Right.
which speaks to a reality that these things are more a culmination of what he was going for than some agenda-driven kind of. So a lot of people that call themselves enjoying Trek are enjoying and leaning into the Captain Kirk and focusing on the skirts and the amounts of
the white guy,
that was
the
on
white
the screen.
military
Yes.
guy, you know.
The white
Yeah.
Mary Sue that broke all the rules, that cheated the Kobayashi Maru, that did a lot of Michael Burnham-esque things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was a
fine.
white guy, so it doesn't piss you off. Yeah.
It's
Okay, so let's
fine.
go there. So what's your take on Star Trek Discovery?
Star Trek Discovery is, like most Trek shows, it took a little while to get its bearing, right?
Yep.
There were points where it has not been the best Trek of all time.
Okay.
But also, I think a lot of the derision that it gets is based in those complaints. So this isn't what I'm used to looking at when I look at the screen. And why isn't everything a callback? And why isn't everybody kind of a skin of the other people that I like? But I think overall, as a show, it is taking on a flagship space in this kind of new generation of Trek. It embodies a lot of the problem solving that was so inherent in Next Generation, but it's really, especially this fourth season, really getting back to the kind of episodic get on a world and get some stuff done roots of TOS. So it started out as a rough ride, but it's starting to shape up into having its own identity, but also embodying a lot of what's best in all of Trek. And I'm also, just as a side note, I am watching Star Trek Prodigy a lot more than I thought I was going to at first. I thought to myself, well, oh, this is sweet, something to get the kids on
show.
board.
Yeah.
It's got a protostar in it. Like I'm on board. I'm with it. So I think that in Trek, Discovery Disco is doing a service that I think won't be fully understood until Strange New Worlds comes out.
Right.
But I think it's doing some heavy lifting to open the door to allow some of the best of what was in TOS to be able to manifest in this kind of new format when you talk about the budget, the effects, and all of that sort of stuff.
Right.
And really being able to give Disco the ability to take on some of these other elements so that you could strip down Strange New and really give the fans a level of storytelling balanced with fan service that can be on par with what people experience with No Way Home, right? Yes, we got to see the guys and it was all the Spider-Man and that was super cool. But man, when he caught Mary Jane, you got to feel, man, when that kid gave up his whole life to be like, there's a story there. So I think Disco being allowed to be that front runner, to be that frontiersman, if you will, to go out there and work on the mining planets in television is going to allow that Enterprise to come through sleek and give us that orange bridge and really lead us all the way to the moment that Pike meets his fate. And I think that if people were more willing to look at the Star Trek universe as a whole and look at the moving mechanisms, right? Janeway ain't supposed to be Picard. Everybody knows that Cisco will tell you, I'm not Picard. So,
Cisco.
Like some people are gonna punch Q, and you need that kind of that kind of space and that kind of rotation. Because, you know, shows like Picard, shows like Discovery, they got to button up a lot of continuity that at issue and at hand between TNG and TOS. So there's a lot of work being done on other levels that I think we as a society have become so behind the scenes, so kind of we're always consuming content that we all think ourselves critics. And we kind of miss the big picture that there are moving parts, that people get sick, that people have to, you know, get on roll calls. So I think Disco started out rough, but so did just about every other
Star Trek
show after the original series.
Right. True. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you, what's your take on Lower Decks? And let me say this before. I was like, when I heard about Lower Decks, I was like, you know, I'm really not into this, a show like this. I probably won't watch it. And but then I saw like a preview where they had a bunch of the actors on it, and then they had the showrunner Mark McMahon. It's Mark McMahon, right?
So smart.
Yeah. And anyways, so and I watched like the opening first episode, and I'm like, this show looks a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And I love it. I really dig Lower Decks. I think
so
it's great.
Smart.
Yeah.
It is so. I can understand the fear that people, you know, might have thought it was going to be like, you know, Star Trek Night Live or something. But my goodness, like not Marcus Mike, but he obviously loves the universe. He obviously knows the lore, and the I used to love the Naked Gun movies, and somewhere along the line, I came across the actual show Police Squad, and I realized what the problem was, that when that show came out, it was literally too fast for a world that didn't have DVR. The jokes were this. And he has a way of putting in hardcore jokes coming in at a clip a minute that if you know everything, you almost have to pick yourself up off the floor.
Yeah.
But if you're just coming into it and watching it as a show, there's enough obedience to the rules, enough observation of how things in Starfleet actually function, that you're watching a competent show. In the last season, where the ship goes out, where they have this huge emergency, and they're doing TNG level problem solving. Oh man, I let my light go out. Of course the light wants to malfunction, so we're gonna have to do a lighting deal here.
We lost our ring light, sir.
The ring light is out. Okay.
Ring light malfunction.
Power to the drawing lamp.
Yeah.
So divert all emergency power to the drawing lamp and life support systems. So, you know, there's the clip a minute jokes for the diehards. There's the structural integrity that's just, it's a solid show. Oh no, now my battery's low. Everything's happening all at the same time. Okay, so we're gonna make a slight adjustment to right here so that I'm on the charger. All right.
Okay.
So
dramatic camera angle.
Yeah. Now things are dramatic. Now let me tell you about Lower Decks. Now it's time to talk Lower Decks. So you obviously love the lore. There's the clip a minute aspect. There's the structural integrity to where you could just watch it as a show. And then there are the personalities. Like, I don't want to be making an unfair comparison, but there are Rick and Morty elements to the level of badass that Mariner is.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a hard thing to balance, particularly in animation, to have a character that seemingly always knows what to do. Right. And somehow that hasn't become boring and it hasn't become bad. So Laura did, like, I love Trek, and I don't really feel a need to differentiate between new Trek and old Trek.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Like I love Trek, and I love that, you know, again, going back to military experience, there are all kinds of people in the military, in the uniform, right? Some are gonna not play by the Kobayashi Maru rules. Some people are the kinds of people that you need in the Delta Quadrant. Some people might turn into prophets that love baseball. There is room for everybody. You can fit all those personalities on a single starship, let alone to have the entirety of the fleet. So there's so much room that, you know, to any naysayer, to any hater, to any person that's trying to stick up for Roddenberry's original vision, just go get on the ship that does the stuff that you like.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Because I pretty much love it all. There are certainly episodes that might drag or moments that you don't think are as exciting. And sometimes you get to revisit those things and you look upon them completely different. So, there are TNG episodes that in continuity, this is boring. When we're going to fight the Borg? And then you go back and you're like, oh my God, like the drum head. Like where was my head at originally? So,
Yep. That's right.
Trek is a great fandom. And if you're paying attention, at least in my humble opinion, it gives you a lot of room to work on yourself and to try to strive to be, you might not be the A1 helmsman, you might not be worthy of a job on the Enterprise, but just to be able to get into Starfleet, the same way people talk about the NFL, only 1% of all the people who play sports make it into the NFL. To get over the kinds of bigotry that I see every day on the internet, the ways in which people try to find excuses to hate one another, I honor and respect Star Trek for giving me a fandom to be a part of that, for me personally, allows me to strive to avoid being that kind of person, to avoid being hateful, to avoid trying to down people for who they are. So,
that's great. Well, I think that's a great note to wrap it up and end the interview on. Do you want to make a plug for your stuff again?
Yeah, sure. So again, I am Quinn McGowan. I'm a Memphis-based comic book artist. My primary work of focus is Project WILDFIRE, which is my personal creation. You can find any of that content at operative.net, or you can find it at legendspresscomics.com. You could also be on the lookout of some of my other works that I've worked on. So I did a 6-pager in Noir is the New Black from Fair Square Comics. You could look that up and find it. I worked on Mine with ComicMix. That's also available online. It was a Ringo Award winning comic. I'm also currently on the third series, about to go into production on the third series of Luna Unleashed, which I have the privilege of working on with my lovely wife as writer. And that's something that we do for Black Women's Health Initiative out of Atlanta, Georgia. So you can go to BWHI.com or onourOwnTerms.com and you can look up those books. And also be on the lookout for Redacted with Redacted and that other thing that I can't talk about yet because they might actually sue me if I say it. Oh yeah, and
it's really good.
Anybody has Disney, and if anybody has Disney Plus, there is a TV movie on there called Flora and Ulysses, and my very good friend Jeremy Simpson, who did one of the covers for Project WILDFIRE, is a storyboard artist, and he actually did the artwork in that movie, which is about a young lady whose father is a comic book artist, and he actually brought me on to do some art in there. So I actually got to work for the mouse that one time. So those are all the things that you could probably look for that I had a hand in.
Okay, and then just send me all those links, and I'll put all that stuff down in the description. Absolutely. You can go down and click on it, and then just have a great old time. Well, it's been a great hour and a half just getting to know you a little bit. We kind of knew each other a little bit on Twitter. It's a lot different when it's actually in person, of course. Of course. Yeah, this is really fun.
Okay.
All right, Quinn.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you thinking of me, and I had a great time. So I'll send you those links you don't get them tonight, you'll get them first thing in the morning.
Sounds good. All right,
man.
take care. Live long and prosper, sir.
All right, you do the same.
Pranakasha production. Fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life. For the benefit of all beings everywhere. We gotta change.